Hello everybody, welcome back to Harman Art TV. And we're in the rain because it's raining here, as you can see. But in this video I would like to talk about what is Stijl. I've been inspired by this movement previously in the past, in terms of being inspired by this movement, this art movement, for my own kind of my own artwork and inspiration. So I thought it'd be just interesting to talk a little bit about, you know, what is it and what was kind of important about it. So firstly, after digging, doing my research and looking at my own research as well, we'll start by saying, Stijl, basically, it translates to the Dutch word for the style, and I'll talk about that a bit later on, about why it was called the style. So basically it was a name given to a magazine established in 1917 by the Dutch painter and designer and writer Theo van Doesberg. So I think he set up this magazine. So it was just I guess it was a kind of magazine to help promote this movement and the ideas, this artistic movement and the ideas behind it. So it was an art movement that was founded in the Netherlands in 1917 by Piet, who was a painter at the time, and Theo van Doesberg. So the art movement, it basically consisted of painters, designers and architects. So it was like a broad kind of spectrum of lots of different people, and they were all kind of working together, creating this kind of unique style, which all kind of related to each other. So that's why it's called an art movement, because it was a style of art that lots of people were doing, but it all related to each other, and they were all kind of sharing the similar kind of goal and values and ideas. So all of these artists seemed to work separately, whether the art was painting, sculpture, furniture or architecture. So it all came together to form this unique style. That's why it's called the style, Stijl, meaning the style. What characterized this art style? Get my paper in order. So this art was characterized by the use of geometric shapes that consisted of individual parts that came together to form a whole. So this is a pretty strong characteristic of the art that was created within this style. If you go to places like the Tate Modern in London, you can see examples of paintings by Piet Mondrian. He uses like bright colours and shapes and line to basically create kind of these spatial type dimensions in the painting that kind of scatter your eye, draw your eye to different parts, but everything kind of works as one. And so a lot of these artists were pretty much doing the same. They were using geometric shapes, breaking up forms, and using things like primary colours and space to help convey this kind of stylized artistic idea that all came together within this movement. So the individual parts conveyed spatial relationships to one another, and colour seemed to have been used in a minimal approach in according to these principles. And primary colours were often used, like yellow, red and blue. So that was like the kind of principal stylized kind of idea of how they created this, of what kind of went into this art movement, based upon geometric shapes, primary colours, line and space. What were other artists saying? I found an example from Theo van Doesberg. and he was the guy who gave this name to the magazine that was established in 1917 to help kind of promote the ideas of the Stijl style. And yeah, so he wrote in, I think he wrote in this magazine in he wrote in Stijl in 1923 that art is a spiritual activity in man, with the aim to deliver him from the chaos of life, from tragedy. Art is free in the application of its means, but bound up by its own laws and nothing but its laws. And that quote was taken from a book written by Paul Overy in 1969. I guess that kind of sums up, you know, why the kind of values behind this movement, you know, was to create a kind of, yeah, almost like a spiritual activity. I mean, if you think about it, art is a kind of, you know, spiritual activity in itself, you know, because it's not really necessarily based upon reality, and it's not necessarily always based upon proven facts and truths, but instead it's based upon its own reality. And, you know, you could say it's the act of making art and the act of observing and participating in art is almost like a religious activity. Yeah, what are my thoughts about, you know, about the Stijl, this art movement? I think what I've found out about this movement is that the artists seem to have this collective vision of how art could coexist and enhance people's daily lives. And I think that's really interesting, because if you look now in today's time period, we don't really seem to have, I haven't come across like a kind of art movement where its aims are to enhance people's lives as a collective group of people and then transform architecture or transform society in any way, because it seemed like during that time these artists were, you know, it wasn't just about art, it was kind of bigger than themselves, because they were branching off into things like furniture and design and architecture and painting, and it seems like they almost wanted to create a new kind of society from this in some way, and perhaps they wanted this to enhance and change people's lives in a different way, in a better way perhaps. So I find it really interesting, because in today's world I haven't come across a kind of movement that involves art, that involves a collective group of people from different disciplines within the art world, but they're all kind of working together, trying to create like a new world, you know, a new kind of human construction that we can all live in. So I find that really interesting. And the movement itself was quite futuristic, quite utopian, because, you know, you look at some of like, there was a house, and I was really fortunate to go to that house in the Netherlands, in Holland, and see an example of the Stijl architecture and see how this kind of played into reality. Yeah, and you can check that out in one of my previous videos that talks about that house. So yeah, it's almost like this movement had some kind of utopian or futuristic kind of ideals to it, and it was pretty, I'd say it's pretty ahead of its time. And also, yeah, and going back to, you know, how art could function in society and how it could potentially enhance people's lives and change people's perception and view of the world, and kind of bring people together, I guess. So obviously this art movement ended, and, you know, the magazine stopped being published, at least that I know of, and these kind of ideals, this style has kind of moved on and kind of got left to history. But I don't know, I kind of wonder what would it be like today if this was still pretty popular and this had kind of taken off. Would we see this kind of style kind of everywhere, you know, in terms of being like implemented in buildings and design. I don't know, it's, you know, and how would this influence like people's behavior? Would we all be behaving differently if we were living in this kind of idealistic utopian hybrid between art, painting, architecture and design? You know, it's quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, the movement just ended there, really. Anyway, that's a wrap for this video. I thought it would just be interesting to talk about a bit more about Stijl, because it's also influenced my thinking and my work in the past. Yeah, I hope you have liked this video. If you have, feel free to give it a thumbs up or give it a good like. And yeah, you're more than welcome to check out my Patreon page, and you'll get access to exclusive content, and you can see these videos before they're published, and get things like merchandise and all that good stuff. And so thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, bye bye.